I'm curious with those guys and all of the distance crew. I've seen some posts too where you're doing some finger pricks and doing some lactate testing and stuff.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing that, and how beneficial is that? Because I know when at this I went to Monmouth University and they started using I guess it was a doctor who was doing the testing for them, and they've had some good middle distance runners that have come along since they've done that. Allie Wilson, who's now one of the top 800-meter runners in the country, she's in Indiana, but I know that that was very beneficial for the coaches there in the program. How long have you been doing that, and how beneficial has it been in terms of giving kids the right time domains to hit when they're doing their
Yeah, yeah,
intervals
yeah.
and the threshold training?
So with the actual testing, lactic testings, this was our first year. I bought
Okay.
two different ones to kind of see which one we liked. The kind of theory is like don't change more than 10% each year. I like to be that guy. I'm going to say like we're going to change 17.3 just to be different than everybody else. And last year, our assistant coach now, James, I was coaching him, and of course, double T threshold started becoming kind of the buzzword. And he was like, "Hey, coach, I think I want to try this." And mathematically, scientifically, for him individually, it made sense. He, man, really thrived at like the longer stuff, half marathon, marathon, and just at aerobic capacity. And we actually started it right at the start of the outdoor season. And I'd never done it before, but I was open to it. And we would run every single Wednesday together. And I mean, just this is why I hired the kid, because he wanted to be a coach and he wanted to understand the science behind it. And so we were looking at these things, and Luca Medeo, he's coming from Germany. He's got like 3 years of double T threshold training underneath him, and it's becoming more popular, and I'm more open to it. And it's like, man, I think the science behind it. Again, Coach Ron Mann, he and I over the summer we're talking more about it too, and curious with like what Mike Smith's doing out at NAU. And so yeah, we had a handful of guys started in the fall, not everybody, and then we had a few guys started in indoor season, and we're going to have quite a few guys do it this summer and fall. But it was more, I mean, you're seeing people like do the lactic testing, and Luca Medeo and a couple of Alina and Sherva, they had done it with Ukrainian Federation as well, and different things. And uh, it was like, okay, we need to get this. And Jacob Thompson from Under Armour out at Dark Sky out at with Stephen Haas and all those guys. I messaged him quite a bit. I was like, hey man, like, what do you see guys out there using? And he gave me the number to the exercise physiologist that works with him. Had like a 45-minute conversation with this guy, like, man, I think I know what I'm doing, but you've done it for much longer than I have. And so some do's and don'ts. And then I started going, and being obviously safe with it all, gloves and all this stuff, but started testing and really honestly like didn't learn anything. We're kind of trying to find that 1% within the 1%, but it just gave us more data and kind of solidified, okay, we know what we're doing. At the end of the day, like the best data that we can pull from, or the best source of data is, man, what is this athlete telling me? They know their self better than anyone else. And so what are you thinking? And especially Luca Medea, like we started laughing quite a bit because it's kind of a joke. Like this kid could tell you, hey, this was my, BPMs per the session. This was my MMOLs per the session. Like the kid was so dialed in and locked in. He knew exactly what his body was producing per pace. Um, and so it became another piece of data that we could use. And again, if we're trying to find that 1% within that 1%, like if we're going to be that precise, which we want to be, couldn't this separate us from the rest of the field more or less? Man, we wanted to do that. Um, but the biggest, greatest source of data that we can get is, hey guys, hey ladies, how we feeling? What's your
Mhm.
body telling you? And really analyzing on that. On top of that, let's take heart rate, let's take lactic levels, um, all these other data points that we can take. Because I'm a spreadsheet geek, and so we're putting all this data into charts and analyzing. But ultimately, it's like, yeah, coach, that felt really really smooth, and that felt really really fit, and dang, I feel really really fit. When they're telling you that, our biggest thing, our say is like, you look like you're falling asleep. If we're in the point where I'm yelling at a workout, like, guys, you look bored, you look like you're sleeping, and they're running 5K race pace for 1,000 meters, for 1K reps, we know we're in a sweet spot. If they're smiling, I've got a young man, Caleb Rigney, like if this kid looks like he literally like he's gonna fall over at any minute, man, we know he's really, really fit. If Luca Medeo's looking at me and he's just kind of yawning, you know, if they're smiling, just body language is the biggest thing. If Gustav, like he has just this beautiful smile. If he's just in the middle of a session, 2K reps, and he's smiling, man, I know we're fit. Luca Medeo or Lucas Santorum is very vocal. He's just like, coach, easy, like so ready to go. And we have that type of dialogue and that relationship. These guys they're not going to pull any punches. The women, Lizzie Lucas and men, like I'm always like, you're not supposed to be smiling. You're supposed to be hurting. And she's like, coach, I'm fit, because she just has this smile. I mean, we could draw blood all day long, but nah, she's telling me what I want to see and need to hear as the coach, and that the athlete's really, really fit.
I'm curious, Coach, with the double T training, is it always AM PM? Have you ever experimented with a PM and then an early AM session?
When we're in season for double T, typically we'll have, no joke, we'll have usually, like on a typical workout day, we might have 12 to 14 different workouts. We're very individualized based, and between, like, for myself and Coach James and Coach Abriella, like we work with 70 athletes between middle distance, and race walk. And so 12 to 14 is the norm for on a typical Tuesday or a Friday. With the double T sessions, and again, we only had it's growing, and it's going to continue to grow. I mean, James was the only one last year out of a group of, I think I was working with 14 athletes at the time, that did double T last year. And so we've added more, but we really work around class schedules. If you have an 8 a.m. or you don't have an 8 a.m., if you have an 8 a.m., then we're probably starting at 5:30 in the morning. If you don't have an 8 a.m., we're probably starting at 8 a.m. And then we're looking to have somewhere between 4 to 5 hours between that session and the next session. And again, that kind of works with class schedules. We'll have some young people that have an afternoon session that might start at 6 because they have the class that goes much later. And to each individual, again, I've said quite a bit about Luca Medeo. Like, this man knows what his body needs, and so he was like definitely like a 5 hour window between one session to the next, where Alina Bosch, hey man, give her 3 or 4 hours, so she's good to go again. Sherva is really good to go again with 3 or 4 hours. We have race walkers. I got to race Cole Bennett. As far as we know, to our knowledge, he's the only race walker to ever do double T threshold. And again, we're looking at the science, the mathematical equation and the science behind it. Of basically, it's more time at threshold. If we're able to break it up, we're able to do more. In theory, like, some people are like, well, why don't you do 3 sessions? Well, you could, but there does become a point, and not to write a book, but there is a point. But we started working with this young man, and he was like, Coach, I think I want to start doing double T thresholds with race walking. And I was like, this is my first year coaching race walking. And I'm like, cool, is that even a thing? He's like, I don't know anybody else who's doing it. I was like, man, the science, the adaptations, the specifics behind it makes sense. I think it could work. And, this kid he came in running, it was like high 27 minutes for a 5K race walk. He ran 22. And when I say ran, like he's running race walk 22 something. And so something's obviously working there, and he's the one doing the work. But I mean, this young man, he's doing, 60, 65 miles a week of race walk, and he's doing double T thresholds on Tuesdays and Fridays. I mean, this is a young man he's like, let's do 5 sessions in a week. And I was like, I think we're pressing the envelope right now, and that could be a possibility next year, but like we're doing quite a bit more than you've ever done before. And, but yeah, it kind of depends on the athlete, and depends on the season, like the time of year. We're doing a double T, and maybe we're going early in the morning. It's like 3 o'clock. It's really, really hot in the afternoon. All right, let's go 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and so it opens up that window. And obviously, nutrition and sleep and all these other stress management all play a role in that as well. Probably the most revolutionized, if I can use that word, trying to use a big word here, but we made a transition in our threshold, our double T threshold training, where maybe I shouldn't give our secret away here, but we don't know of anybody else who's doing this. And so the guys were really leery. Like I had to like sit down. Or again, they're like, Coach, we're not questioning you, but I was like, you want to talk about something? I'm pumped about this. Like, guys, what is it? They're like, Coach, we don't know anybody else who's doing this. And so here I'm in my office, and there's like 6 or 7 guys, and I got a whiteboard, and I'm explaining it to them. And basically, what we started doing, we got to a point with threshold training, and I said, "Hey, I want to try something." And I said, because I'll be honest, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to explain my theory behind this to them. And it was, I want to incorporate 5K race pace inside of threshold. And they're like, "Well, doesn't that defeat the purpose?" I said, "Well, what is the purpose of threshold?" They're like, "Well, we want to, have a certain amount of volume at threshold and be able to extend the volume." I said, "Correct." I said, "Guys, we're running out of volume for the duration that we're racing. The distance of the event doesn't change. It's either 3,000 or 5,000 or 10,000." I said, "We're already getting up for some of them 14, 15, I would say 14 miles, 12 to 14 miles worth of threshold volume." So, guys, I don't think we need to go any further than that. Again, the event's not going further than 3,000 or 5,000 and 10,000. I said, but can we incorporate 5K race pace? We have maybe possibly a small spike in our lactic levels, and then it comes back down, and we can buffer that and maintain that and kind of find that homeostasis, because that's ultimately what we're trying to find. How close can we be to homeostasis with a certain level of lactic threshold in being produced, a certain level of lactic, excuse me, being produced in our body, and more importantly, hydrogen ion buildup being produced in our body. Um, and so, like, can we elevate this, absorb that small spike, but then can we get to a point where the distance between threshold and 5K becomes smaller and smaller and smaller? And so the numbers, the ions, the lactic levels, they're not necessarily spiking, and it starts to feel very, very manageable. And so what we started doing is, like, a clear example, we would start doing 9 times a K with a minute rest, and every third K would be at 5K race pace. And on paper, like the first day, they thought I was like trying to kill them. They were like, "Coach, we understand and we trust you. I just don't know if this is going to work. That just seems crazy." And I said it might be, but I think the payoff could be huge. And I think this is going to work because it's the science, and I'm kind of looking at it, conversation with Ron Man, and a whiteboard. I literally had a whiteboard and just kind of drawing this thing out with these guys, and we're testing and all this, and they handle it perfectly. I mean, actually better than we anticipated as a coaching staff. And they're like, "Yeah, coach, whatever you throw at us, man, we're good with it. You don't even need to explain it anymore." And so we started kind of working some new elements, and I'm sure other people have done this. We just have not seen it. I mean, I went searching for it because I want to know, like, had someone done this, what had they maybe found to work or not work, or like, hey, warning, don't try this because you're going to fall right on your face. And we hadn't found anywhere that someone had done some stuff like this before. Um, and again, that's no discrediting if someone's out there, man. Kudos to them. They got to it before we did, but we started doing that this year, and man, it was there was some skepticism, and there was definitely some curiosity and a lot of concern, and I'm cool with that. Um, if you're going to do something that maybe is cutting edge and you don't know of anybody else doing it, like, that's scary. And as a coach, I'm like, man, I hope this works. On paper, it looks great, and all the exercise science content I have, and in my mind, I'm like, this should work, right? But then we go out and we do it, and the guys and the ladies absolutely crush it, and then we make some modifications. We just start having dialogue, and from there, we just become more persistent on that 1% within that 1%.